In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how we can link or reference to other spreadsheets in Excel or Google Sheets in a way that those references don't break and automatically update. So if you look at this particular example right here, you'll see that I have this amount that gives me the total in a different spreadsheet based on all of these amounts I have in this other spreadsheet in a background in column B. And if you typically do this the regular way, what is going to happen is if you go to that source spreadsheet and start adding columns, adding rows, deleting columns, so basically things move, this total will stop operating. So you wouldn't be getting this amount anymore. Because at this point, those amounts, they used to be in column B, but they're no longer in column B, they're now in column C. But you can see in my case, this still works just fine. I was able to go and add a column, or I can go here and delete a column, and I can even rename this to expense report to a different tab name, and yet my total amount will still operate just fine. And the way we're going to do this in both Excel and Google Sheets has the same exact logic behind it. The linking part itself is a little different just because Excel chose a different way of linking as opposed to Google Sheets, but it's really like a minor difference between the two, but I will show you in both. So if you're having a hard time finding that in Google Sheets or in Excel, you'll see how it's done in both in this video. So let's get started. So I'm going to get started here in Excel. Of course, I'll show you how to do the same thing in Google Sheets too. Like I said, it's not really that different. Let me just demonstrate what this problem is like when we just do it the common way we usually write a formula. So, for example, if I have another Excel file, I'm going to start that file so you can see that. If I wanted to get that total amount from this other file, typically what I would do, I would go here and do equals sum because I would like to sum those numbers. And then I need to basically reference to these numbers here. And in Excel, we can do that very easily by simply just moving to this other file right here and simply just select a range of values. And the trick here is to not move back to your original spreadsheet, but stay up here in the formula bar and finish your formula. So we're going to stay in the formula bar. We're going to close parentheses right here, hit enter. And once I hit enter, it will bring me back to my first file and give me the total. As a matter of fact, let me just add a new column here and just say total amount. And I'll do some currency formatting. Now let's first of all take a look at this formula. You can see the formula right up here in the formula bar. So you can see what happens when you link to a different file in Excel. It starts by the source of the spreadsheet being on the left of this exclamation sign and the range you're pointing to on the right side of this exclamation sign. You can see right of this exclamation sign, we have this B2 through B15 as an absolute reference, which is technically not necessary. You can get rid of those dollar signs, and this would have worked exactly the same way. This would only make a difference if you're planning to drag this formula down or right or something like that. So this is the range right here, as opposed to whatever's on the left side of this exclamation, which is going to be the source where this range is going to come from. And that is a two-part thing. One part of that is this part in square brackets, which is pointing to the file that you have. So basically, what's the source file we're linking to? And that would be this file in the background that's called expense business. So that's the name of this other file, and that's an XLSX file. So that's the name of that other file. And then we basically point to the actual tab name in that file. So the worksheet down here, if you look here, it's called expense. And this is the name of that worksheet that you're pointing to. And all of that is in single quotes. So you can see this whole thing here starts in single quotes here, ends in single quotes here. Now, the problem with this, if we just go ahead and save this file, and simply just close this thing. So at this point, that file is closed. So what's going to happen now if I just go ahead and add a new column here? So now that column that used to be column B moved to column C. And because of this, if we just open that file we just had, you can see that this total no longer operates. So if I open this formula, you'll see that our formula still links, and we can just look at it here on the top. It's still pointing to that column B, which is basically this column right here. Now column B doesn't include amounts anymore. And we have this nightmare thing that this formula no longer works. And of course, you can now go here and update this to column C, which is the new column, in order for this to update and give you the total. But you can see how this can be a problem if you have a lot of things going on and then you add a column, delete a column someplace else, and you have 50 different formulas, and now you have to go and update all of those. So what's the solution for this? So I'm going to just get rid of this, and I'll go back here. I'll delete this column. So the solution for this is to use a named range instead of using a regular range. So what is a named range? So a named range is basically, if I, for example, want to sum this column of values, typically you would just go here, do equals sum, open parentheses, and highlight this range over here, close parentheses, hit enter, and that should give you your total amount. That's our typical range. Now, to do the same thing using a named range, what we can do, we can start by first selecting this list of numbers. And of course, if you want the whole column, you can select the whole column. If you want to go, let's say 100 lines down, you can do that. For me, I'm just going to do this range. That should illustrate how this works. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to click in this upper left corner here where it says B2 and type a name for this. So it can literally be anything you want, just no spaces, no special characters. I'm going to call this amounts and type enter. And at this point, this range is called amounts. What that means is that now I should be able to go here and do sum. And then after I open parentheses, I can type the word amounts like this, which is the name of the range. And you can see how it knows what I'm pointing to. That's this. And if I hit enter, that would be that total amount. And this works. And what's nice about this, that same name could be used on a different sheet too. So if I go to a different tab down here, I can go here and do equals sum, open parentheses, and use the word amounts, which is the name for that range. And that should give me that total amount here as well. So no problem. As you can see, it's going to work across the same file, which also means when you name a range within the same file, you want to make sure that you basically have unique names. So if you do different columns and you name those columns, because some formulas will need not just one column of data, they will need another column and third column and fourth column. So you're going to name all of those, but you want to make sure all those names are unique. So at this point, if you wanted to use that name, we should be able, like in Excel, it should be very easy. We don't even have to write anything. Excel will do it for us. So right now, if I go to this other file and do equals sum, open parentheses, and simply just go and select that same area. So if I go right here to this file and simply select this range, that's the same range that I named. At this point, if you remember, we go to the formula bar here and finish our formula. So I'm going to go here, close parentheses, hit enter. And now let's just take a look at what happened. You can see we got the total. Now, if I click here, you can see now we have a little different formula. So what we have again, before exclamation sign, we have the source where this data is coming from. And this time, the source is just the name of the file. It doesn't have the sheet name. It doesn't have this name expense anymore. So the source at this point is just the name of the file. You may sometimes see this part being much longer because in addition to that name, you may also see like the path where that is located. If it's a local folder, you'll see it's like this folder, that folder, this folder, etc. If it's a SharePoint thing, it will show you that link to that destination. But that's going to be the source, and then exclamation. And after exclamation, we have the named range. And that was that amounts. So basically, we just got rid of the name of the sheet. What we have is just the name of the range, which is called amounts. Now, at this point, if I just apply this and save this, and by the way, for those of you who use SharePoint, you're going to be doing exactly the same thing. Just open both of the files in Excel and do the link. You'll get the same results. So I'll just go ahead and save this file and close this file just to show you that it's going to just work at this point. So I'm going to close this. So at this point, let's say I decide, okay, this tab should be called expense report. And maybe I also add a column here, a couple of rows up here or whatever. So basically you would make your changes. Now it's in a different position, right? It's not in the same position. Well, at this point, let's just go ahead and open that other file and see what happens. There it is. So it opened up. And you can see once I opened it, here, it works just fine. And the reason for that is because as we add new columns and we add new rows, etc., all these changes, that named range will automatically update to point to the right spot. And since we're linking to the name, not to hard-coded B something, B some other thing, it will just end up working fine, as you can see. So no problems. Now, before I demo this exact same thing in Google Sheets, I do want to give you an idea how to find those named ranges. So typically, if you just click on this drop down, it will show you what names you have available. Right now, I only have one, so you can see that amount shows up here. But for example, if I go here and name this one too and call this one types, hit enter, now I'm going to have two of them. So if I open this, see, I have two names. And if you decide you want to change those or delete those at some point, you can do so by going to this formulas on top, click on this name manager right here, and you can see we got amounts, types, those are those two ranges. You could at this point delete them, click edit, change them, and so on. So this is how you can modify those named ranges if you have to. So now let's just do this exact same thing in Google Sheets. So I have this spreadsheet in Google Sheets. I'm going to go ahead and open another spreadsheet. I'll rename this. And now we're about to do that linking. Now in Google Sheets, to be able to point from one spreadsheet to another, you have to use a function called import range. The way that works, you basically go here and type equals import range. And this is really the part that's different between Google Sheets and Excel, is the actual linking process. In Excel, you can just click on the other file, select, it will do the thing for you, it will do the reference. In Google Sheets, you have to make this thing happen. So the first part here is the spreadsheet URL of the other source file, and you have to provide it in quotes like this as a string. So I'm going to go to that other file, copy the link for that, go to this file, and simply just paste that right here between those quotes. So that's going to be that source file, comma, and the second part is range string. And again, because it's string, it's going to be in double quotes as text format again. And this is going to be the name of the sheet, exclamation, and basically what you're pointing to. So if I, for example, look at this, the name down here, it's called expenses right here. Let me just copy that. So that would be right there, expenses. Then we have exclamation sign again, and we follow this by the range. So B2 colon B, wherever that's going to go. So in this case, that would be B15 if you look here. So I'm going to go here and do B15 as you would expect. And again, if you remember, when I did this in Excel, it did this in absolute reference like this with dollar signs. And if you need absolute references, you can do that. It doesn't change anything whether you use this dollar signs in this case or not. If you don't understand what those dollar signs do and why you should or should not use them, I do have videos covering absolute versus relative references, so you can understand what's the purpose of those dollar signs. But for this particular example, we don't really care about that. So I'll just go ahead and now hit enter. And what's going to happen, it needs to know that I have access to that other file. So I'm going to click on this ref and see I'm going to get this. I'm going to click allow access. And at this point, assuming you have privileges to access that file, you'll see how it will basically just bring over that range of data. Now, I don't want to just bring it over. I want it to sum. So I'm going to go back and just put this whole thing in sum function. Now, it's important if this is your first import range to do this formula like this first and then add sum. If you've done other imports already from that file, you don't have to do this one first. You can just do both at the same time. So I'm going to do sum and close sum after this whole thing and hit enter. And now we got our total amount like we did in Excel from a different file. As you can see, that's our total amount. Now, personally, I hate having this super long formulas. And because of that, instead of doing this full link to the other spreadsheet, I typically just use the ID of the spreadsheet. And the ID is what follows this D slash here and what goes until this other slash here. So if you want to keep the whole thing, feel free to do so. I prefer to remove this first part before the ID and this part after this forward slash. So just to keep the ID, that makes the formula much shorter and easier to deal with for me. So you can see I get the same amount. But again, the problem with this is the same problem we encountered in Excel. So what's going to happen if I now go to my original source file and decide, well, let's just add a column here or something like that, or maybe rename this tab. So let's go see what happened. If I go check the other file, you'll see, of course, this no longer works because we'll link to that B column. That's no longer B column. We have the same exact problem in both of these applications. So again, you would have that same problem also if you kept everything the same, but renamed this to some other name down here. Again, remember, when you do this link, you're saying the data is coming from this tab called expenses, but now that tab doesn't exist anymore. So this is where we face these problems. So I'm going to go back and just go back to our regular formula. So at this point, everything should be in the same place as it was before. So it should work now. If I go back, you should see, hopefully, well, maybe I didn't type the name correctly. Let's just go check. Let me just copy this, go back. Looks the same. Maybe we just have to refresh this. Okay, there it is. So at this point now, let's fix this. So how do we fix this? The same exact way. So I'm going to go to my source file. I'm going to select the data I want to link to, and I'm going to name this range. And the way we name this is exactly the same way. We're going to just select this, click in this, what's called the name box, and we're going to just apply a name. So I'll do amounts, hit enter. That will now be the name of that range. Again, if you're going to be increasing the amount of data, you might want to just select more or just grab the whole column. So that way, as you add, it will be included. But for now, I'll just go with that regular range. Now this is called amounts, which means like I did in Excel, I could go here, do sum and type amounts and close parentheses, hit enter. And of course, you can do this from a different tab down here if you wanted to. But what we're trying to do is now use that name amounts in this other file. So I'm just going to go back in this file. And in this formula, this was the spreadsheet. And this is the range. And currently it has the name of the tab and the range. So I'm going to just do this. I'm just going to get rid of that. And I'm just going to type amounts right between those quotations. And at this point, if I hit enter, that should give me that same total amount, as you can see, because it knows there's a named range called amounts. Except now, if I go back here and start doing things like this, and rename this tab to something else, that shouldn't really affect it. So I should be able to go back and my formula should still operate just fine. I'm just going to refresh this just to make sure everything is good. You can see no problem. Even though we moved that original stuff, this still works the same way. And again, in Google Sheets 2, if I go back here, let me just name this one too. I'm going to call this one types. So if you want to see what named ranges you have available in here, you can just click on this drop down and you can see amounts and types will show up here. Those are those names. And if you want to update those here, you can just simply click on this manage named ranges right in this drop down. And that will bring this panel. And this is where you can modify these things. If you want to change it and update the range in some way, or maybe you want to delete it, you'll click on this trash icon, etc. Let me just delete this one so you can see this types. I'll keep amounts. And there it is. So that's how you link to other files in a way that your references actually update when you make changes to your files. So as usual, I hope you've learned something. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you next time.